Are you planning your own wedding? Are you stuck for styling ideas? Feeling a little overwhelmed? Then this is the podcast for you. I'm your host and wedding planner, Vanessa from the Wedding and Event Creators, and I'm here to bring you practical hints and tips to kickstart your wedding planning. You're listening to the South Coast Wedding Podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by our DIY wedding checklist. It can be found on our website, www.weddingandeventcreators.com.au/blog. Let's get wedding planning. If you're planning a DIY wedding, then this episode is 100% for you. I'm going to give you the top 5 things that are often forgotten or overlooked at a DIY wedding. The week before your wedding can be very stressful and busy time. Suppliers are needing last-minute queries answered, the venue may be ringing to confirm your guest numbers, family are arriving, things need to be picked up and dropped off, and it's all a little bit crazy. As a wedding planner, I specialise in off-site property weddings, which means that we work most weekends in marquees on private properties, in barns, and similar sort of unique and interesting DIY locations. These sort of venues, which if you're listening to this podcast is probably you, are amazing, but there are some considerations that you do need to think about in the lead up and in that downhill run towards your wedding day. I'm going to provide you with our top 5 things that are forgotten at a DIY wedding so that you hopefully don't forget them for your own wedding. So let's get into it. Now, number 1 is ice. Who is going to be providing the ice for your wedding? Some catering companies or wedding coordinators will often bring it along if you've let them know in advance, but others expect that you will BYO. I can highly recommend trying to delegate this to one of the professionals. If you do have a wedding planner or a catering company, ask them if they can bring it along. In our experience, if you do try and delegate this to a family member, we've seen time and time again where they're often running late, they've forgotten, they're busy getting ready, and nobody wants warm beer at a wedding. So a good estimate, or as a guide for you, around the 25 to 30 bags for most medium to large size weddings is probably a good guide. It's better to get more, especially in summer and if you're going to have multiple bar locations, rather than run low and have to do a run to the service station or a local supermarket on the wedding afternoon. Another important consideration is hiring a cool room for your wedding. So most DIY style venues, they don't have large industrial fridge facilities, and ice and eskies just simply don't cut it for a wedding. So cool rooms need to be located in a really great spot, easily accessible for your catering company. So you do want it a little bit out of the way so that it's not an eyesore, but you do want it close to your catering area and the bar. The catering and bar staff are going to be going back and forth, lots and lots of times during the evening. So for practical purposes, a really good location is really important. Make sure that you plug that cool room on prior to your catering arriving so that it's cool when they come to put their food in there to store. And try and store your heavy cartons of beer and wine on those bottom shelves and allow the top rungs for your catering company to put the cake, their boxes of food and other things that they need to access during the evening. Tip number 2 is lighting. Have you got sufficient lighting for your wedding? So often we remember the key areas like inside the marquee or inside your reception barn, but we forget what I call those in between, all those segue areas. So is the pathway towards and around the toilets well lit? Does the catering area or the outdoor bar have lighting around it? Sometimes even having a well-hidden floodlight can cast enough light over a pathway area rather than paying for expensive lights absolutely everywhere. So have a little think about ways that you can light your space. If you do have access to the venue the day before, turn the lights off, do a little recon, do a little walk around, see areas that aren't well lit, and then you've got enough time to get backup lighting options. Suggestions include tiki or citronella torches, which you can grab quite cheaply from Bunnings, festoon or fairy lights, floodlights, maybe not directly in someone's face or line of sight, but sort of hidden for a bit of a glow. Candles and lanterns are a more decorative option to light up your space. Tip number 3 is bins and rubbish. Yes, I know, super boring, very gross, but also a very practical consideration for a DIY wedding. And it's often something that is completely overlooked by our couples that we might mention towards the end of their planning process. There's a lot, and I mean a lot, of rubbish after a wedding. So we've done rubbish removal in the past for our couples' weddings, and we're often talking about a whole ute or a whole van or van and a half load that needs to go to the tip. So it's really important to consider the practicalities of rubbish removal and disposal. So firstly, check the policy and the bin situation at your venue so that you do know what's required and if you need to purchase bins or arrange rubbish removal or hire of bins in advance. So does the venue have small bins to put the general rubbish in? You don't want those big, ugly industrial sized bins or residential big red bins, and they're not very practical either. So we recommend about 4 to 8 smaller black bins. We have them for hire in our catalogue, or you can pick them up quite cheaply from Bunnings, and you can just dot them around all the areas that your guests are going to use. Places like your pre-dinner drinks and canapé space, maybe one near a water station near the ceremony, perhaps near the toilets, the bar, the reception and the catering areas. So make sure that you've got enough, and they're much easier to bag up and transport than the big, larger bins as well. When you do buy bin bags, and that's another thing to consider, people assume that the venue's going to have bin bags and these DIY ones rarely do. So make sure you buy plenty and get those extra strong and extra large quality bin liners. Again, I know this is a very boring topic to talk about, but it's very, very practical and often something that our clients have said, thank God you mentioned that, because that would have been a massive stress on them wedding morning running to try and get this. So make sure that you've got quality bin liners. As the last thing you want to have is your heavy beer bottles and skewers sticking and poking out of the bin bags and tearing them all up when you're trying to transport them through your wedding guests into a large bin. So just be sure to check your venue's policy as a bit of a summary for the rubbish removal and disposal, and make sure that you do know what requirements there are when you're leaving the property. So tip number 4, be sure to pack an event or emergency kit. So I do recommend grabbing a pen to write this down on a bit of paper if you can, but don't worry if you're driving in the car or something, as we do have a blog post about this, which is a fantastic event kit checklist. So you can print that off and make sure that you can recreate your own. So for the weddings that I coordinate, we bring along an amazing event kit that is basically filled with absolutely everything under the sun and that we might need to troubleshoot on the day. So we might need to fix things or glue or plug things in. And it weighs an absolute ton, but it's pure gold when it comes to the realities of what do crop up at a wedding and how often we do use it on site. So I think that you can make your own mini version for your wedding if you're DIYing, and it would be really helpful for any DIY bride wanting to make sure that you basically don't have to dash to Woolies to buy batteries or blue tack the morning of your wedding because you need to fix or repair something. So things that I can recommend, and here's a bit of a list, are scissors, twine, blue tack, bin bags, candle lighters, extension leads, cable ties, first aid kit, some spare candles, spray and wipe, fishing line, double-sided tape, mints, tissues, a torch. The list could go on, and we've probably got over 100 items, batteries and things all in our event kit. But probably the easiest way is to have a good look at what your hire and styling items are, what you're going to be setting up on the day, and pack anything that you might need to fix or utilise them. So, for example, if you've got taper candles or candlesticks that are going to go in a candle holder, you might want to pack some blue tack in case they don't fit in the candle holder and you can secure them better. Tip number 5, and our last tip of the day, is post-wedding pack down and next day cleanup. So after the amazing day that was, then unfortunately does come the absolute mess most of the time the next day. And to be honest, it's not an amazing party if there isn't a mess. So you've done something right in that regard. But the last thing that people really want to be doing the next day when they're nursing a hangover is pack everything up and clean everything up. So it is important to consider that post-wedding cleanup. What there is to do, what there is to clean, sort, wipe down, return, pack away, and who's going to be doing all of this. It's important to consider the venue's terms and conditions and what extent that they expect the property to be left in when you depart. Another consideration is, how does your hire company expect their items to be left for collection? So most hire companies, if they've delivered things like tables and chairs, they do require them to be packed down and stored in their original position for collection. And that can take some amount of time. So just have a little read through the terms and conditions of both the venue and your hire company. We do recommend, or I certainly recommend, either teeing up in advance some helpers, maybe some people that are still in town, so that you and your new husband are not left packing everything up yourself. So maybe family or friends can come. As many hands do make light work. And so they can come in, you can delegate them some jobs. You're on packing down the lights, you're on wiping the tables down, you're on the greenery, and basically delegate out all the jobs. So we do offer pack down and clean up services, which, they testify, all of our past clients, that it was the best thing ever. So if your planner or the venue does offer this as an added service, I highly recommend, and I think it is amazing value for money to just have someone else do all that, so it's not a massive downer the next day. So in summary, I guess, of all of our points, we're at the end of our 5 tips checklist. I'll just briefly recap. So we had number 1 was ice and getting ice for your wedding and a cool room. Number 2 was lighting and making sure there's sufficient lighting across all areas of your venue. Number 3 tip was bins and rubbish, making sure you get and hire in some small bins and who will be doing the rubbish removal the next day. Number 4 was pack an event or emergency kit and a few tips of what we would suggest putting in those. And number 5 was our post-wedding pack down and next day cleanup. So it's super important to make sure that you've covered off all the logistical and those practical things, especially if you're doing your own DIY venue. There's a lot more things to consider at a DIY venue than there would be at a typical function centre where it's all handled for you. So it just means that on the day there's no last minute dashes to Woolies for supplies and your family members aren't running around stressed. So being as organised as you can is really, really important with a great checklist. And it means that you can feel more at ease just knowing that everything has been covered and nothing has been overlooked. So thank you so much for listening today. We've put a link in our show notes to our current blog, which does feature everything that we've spoken about today. And as I mentioned, we also have a blog post that is about an event checklist. So if you're driving in the car and couldn't hear or write down all those things, you might want to jump on to our website, which is weddingandeventcreators.com.au/blog, and have a look at our blog. All right, that's it for me. Thanks, guys. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. Make sure you jump onto our social media pages for more hints, tips and inspo. You can find us on Instagram at Wed Event Creators, on Pinterest at Wed Event Creator, and also via our Facebook page. And please don't forget to visit our website weddingandeventcreators.com.au to see our video tutorials and helpful blog posts.